Elena had never felt so small in her life. She sat at her desk, staring at the email again, disbelief rooting her to the spot. Her promotion, the one she had poured months of sleepless nights, endless meetings and meticulous project planning into, had gone to Marcus. Marcus, her colleague, her so-called friend, the person who had promised to have her back through every project. She reread the words over and over, as if repetition could make them disappear. But the harsh truth remained. The promotion was his, not hers. She could almost feel the betrayal as a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Marcus wasn't just ambitious. He was strategic, manipulative, careful to cover every trace of his maneuvering. Elena had trusted him. She had shared her ideas with him, consulted him about presentations, even confided in him about her own insecurities. And all along, he had been building a web around her, skillfully positioning himself to take what she had worked for. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't luck, it was betrayal. The office felt different that day. Every glance from a co-worker seemed heavier, judgmental. Was it their approval of Marcus's achievement, or their curiosity about her failure? Elena didn't care to know. She rose from her chair, her hands trembling, and walked to the window. The city stretched beneath her in sharp lines of glass and steel, indifferent to her pain. The sunlight seemed brighter, mocking in its neutrality. People below moved with purpose, oblivious to her devastation. She had always loved the city's energy, its constant motion, but today it felt like a cruel reminder that life went on. Even when it had hurt her deeply. By evening, Elena was home, alone in her apartment. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator, the occasional distant car horn. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window, the city lights stretching out in a tapestry of color. Her mind was a storm, filled with rage, confusion, and sorrow. How had she missed the signs? The subtle undermining during meetings, the way he took credit for her suggestions, the half-truths he spread among higher-ups, had they been obvious to everyone else but her? The thought made her stomach twist. Betrayal was a venom she could feel in every nerve. It wasn't just about the promotion. It was about trust broken, about the foundation of friendship shattered without warning. She had always believed that loyalty was a rare gift, something precious in a world driven by competition and self-interest. But Marcus had shown her how fragile that belief was, how quickly it could be shattered for ambition. The anger was the first wave. It rolled over her in heat and intensity. Her fists clenched, nails digging into her palms. She wanted to confront him, to yell, to demand answers. But she knew that would change nothing. It would not reverse the decision. It would not restore what she had lost. And worse, it would expose her vulnerability. Something Marcus would likely exploit further. So the anger shifted into calculation. She started to observe, to plan, to imagine. Revenge was no longer a fleeting thought. It became a quiet, steady flame. She thought of ways she could outmaneuver him, ways to reclaim what had been taken from her. She imagined subtle tactics, revealing inconsistencies in his work, exposing his manipulations in ways the higher-ups couldn't ignore. But even as the ideas formed, a part of her hesitated. Was revenge worth it? Would the satisfaction outweigh the cost to her own integrity? Sleep came fitfully that night. Dreams tainted by images of Marcus smiling in meetings, shaking hands with the board, unaware of the storm growing in her mind. Eleanor's subconscious replayed every interaction they had shared, every word he had said, every moment she had trusted him. She awoke repeatedly, heart pounding, thinking of opportunities, imagining outcomes. By morning, the decision had solidified. She needed to act, but she needed to act carefully. Revenge wasn't about impulsive strikes, it was about strategy. Patience, precision. At work the next day, Elena maintained a calm exterior, masking the turbulence inside. She greeted Marcus with a polite nod, careful not to reveal the storm she carried. He smiled back, oblivious to the resentment simmering beneath her professional composure. In meetings, she spoke deliberately, each word measured, each idea carefully framed. She observed him closely, noting his habits, his weaknesses, the subtle gaps in his armor. If she was going to reclaim her power, she needed knowledge, patience, and timing. Outside the office, she spent hours researching, collecting data on his recent projects, analyzing his strategies, identifying vulnerabilities. Every small discovery was a spark, fueling the fire of determination inside her. The betrayal that had once left her paralyzed now became a catalyst for focus. She realized that Marcus had underestimated her. He had assumed that once the promotion was in his hands, she would falter, resent quietly, and fade into the background. Instead, she was sharpening herself, turning hurt into strategy, pain into resolve. Her personal life became a backdrop to her plans. Friends noticed her distant demeanor, her intense focus, but Elena didn't share her turmoil. Talking would dilute her concentration. She needed silence, reflection, and observation. Nights were spent reviewing meetings, analyzing emails, reconstructing timelines of interactions, and imagining every possible way to turn the situation around. Revenge was no longer an abstract concept, it was becoming a blueprint, something tangible she could act upon when the moment was right. In these moments, Elena also confronted herself. She questioned her own morality, her own motivations. Was she becoming too consumed by the idea of payback? Could her desire for revenge compromise the integrity she had always valued? She thought of the people around her, the colleagues who had once been allies, the managers who had trusted her judgment, the younger employees who looked to her for guidance. Acting impulsively could harm more than just Marcus. It could ripple outward, affecting lives in ways she couldn't anticipate. The internal struggle was exhausting. The desire for justice clashed with the fear of self-destruction. Yet the fire inside her did not waver. Each day at work, Marcus continued to shine in the eyes of others, blissfully unaware of the storm Elena was nurturing. Every handshake, every congratulatory email, every smile he shared with the board reminded her that revenge was not just a fantasy. It was a mission she had to undertake with precision. She imagined him faltering, witnessing his own carefully constructed world crumble, and the thought sent a shiver down her spine. Not out of cruelty, but as a means of reclaiming her power, restoring balance to a world that had seemed unfair. Elena's planning extended to every detail. She analyzed the company structure, identifying the points where Marcus's work could be questioned without exposing herself. She spoke with colleagues discreetly, gathering observations and perspectives. She took note of Marcus's habits, how he relied on certain reports, how he left gaps in his presentations, how he assumed trust would shield him from scrutiny. Every small observation became a building block in the foundation of her eventual strategy. Despite the meticulous planning, Elena's mind was never at peace. The emotional weight of betrayal lingered, shaping her interactions and coloring her thoughts. She found herself replaying scenarios repeatedly, imagining the confrontation, the satisfaction, the vindication. She also imagined failure if her plan were discovered, if her motives were misinterpreted, if she miscalculated. The duality of her desire for revenge and fear of consequence made her hyper-aware, sharpening her senses but also exhausting her. Weeks passed in this state of tense preparation. Elena had transformed from a hurt and angry employee into a focused strategist, navigating the office landscape with precision. She no longer allowed Marcus to provoke her. She observed, recorded, and planned. The betrayal had changed her, but it had not broken her. Instead, it had revealed an inner strength she had not fully recognized before. She realized that the ultimate revenge would not be a public spectacle of humiliation, but a calculated act that restored her dignity and position without compromising her own integrity. By the end of part 1, Elena was ready. She had a plan forming. In her mind, a sequence of actions designed to reclaim what had been stolen. But more importantly, she had clarity. The betrayal that had once left her shattered had been transformed into a source of power. She understood that revenge was not just about punishing Marcus. It was about reclaiming herself, her confidence, and her future. Every sleepless night, every calculated observation, every moment of reflection had prepared her for the next stage. The confrontation, the execution, and the ultimate test of her resolve. In that quiet, determined state, Elena felt the first real sense of control she had since the betrayal. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with moral choices, emotional turbulence, and the constant tension of maintaining her disguise. But she also knew she was ready. Marcus had underestimated her, and that mistake would be his undoing, not through rage, not through impulsive action, but through intelligence, patience, and relentless focus. And as the city lights flickered outside her apartment window, Elena allowed herself a small, grim smile. She was no longer a victim. The game had begun. Elena moved through her days with careful precision, each step measured, each word chosen. The office was her battlefield now, and Marcus, oblivious to the storm she carried, continued his charade of success. Every meeting was a test, every interaction a puzzle piece in the plan she was constructing. She watched him closely, noting the gaps he left in presentations, the moments when his confidence faltered, the tiny inconsistencies that could unravel the image he had carefully built. The fire of betrayal still burned inside her, sharp and insistent, but now it was tempered with strategy. She was no longer just angry. She was focused, calculating, and patient. Outside the office, she spent hours compiling information, organizing evidence, and imagining possible outcomes. Each detail mattered, every small discovery a potential advantage. Yet with each step forward, she felt the tug of conscience. Was she becoming like him, consumed by manipulation and bitterness? The question haunted her, especially during quiet evenings when the city's lights blurred against her window pane, and the silence pressed her to reflect. She wrestled with the duality of revenge and morality, the need for justice and the desire to maintain her own integrity. Her thoughts were a storm of what-ifs. What if she miscalculated? What if her plan backfired? What if the satisfaction she imagined never came? Even so, she pressed on, knowing that hesitation now could ruin everything. Each day, Marcus's successes reminded her of what had been stolen, and yet she found herself admiring his cunning in small, begrudging ways. He was clever, resourceful, and undeniably charismatic, which made the betrayal sting deeper. Elena realized that revenge wasn't simple. It was not just about causing him to fail, but about restoring balance and reclaiming herself. As she walked the corridors, exchanged polite words, and maintained her professional composure, her mind was alive with plotting. She imagined scenarios where his arrogance would be his undoing, where the truth would emerge subtly, leaving him powerless, but without her ever appearing vengeful or cruel. She noted the allies he relied on, the people who trusted his charm and considered how she could reveal inconsistencies without casting herself in a negative light. Simultaneously, she confronted the emotional toll, sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and the ever-present tension between anger and morality. She realized revenge was not a single act but a process, a careful orchestration of patience, observation, and psychological strategy. She rehearsed interactions in her mind, anticipating his reactions, weighing every choice, measuring every risk. At the same time, she also had to maintain her own identity, ensuring she did not lose herself in the pursuit of payback. Her reflection in the mirror sometimes startled her. There was intensity in her eyes, a hardened edge to her expression, a subtle shift from the person she had been before the betrayal. But she reminded herself that this transformation was necessary. She had been wronged, and it was only natural to respond, but she would respond intelligently, not impulsively. Days bled into nights as she refined her approach. Each discovery about Marcus, his overconfidence, his reliance on flattery, his underestimation of her, became a tool she could use. Yet she never allowed herself to celebrate prematurely. Patience was key. Acting too soon could expose her intentions and undo months of careful observation. She also observed herself with equal scrutiny, acknowledging her own temptations, the small pleasures she imagined in seeing him falter, the fleeting satisfaction she might feel. This awareness was crucial. Revenge, she realized, could easily turn into obsession, consuming her rather than him. Through it all, Elena's resolve grew stronger. She was no longer reacting. She was orchestrating. Her emotions were sharp, but they were guided by intellect and strategy. She understood that, to truly reclaim power, she had to act with precision, restraint, and clarity. She imagined the moment when Marcus would finally face consequences, not through chaos or public humiliation, but through the careful unraveling of his own mistakes, guided subtly by her insights. The tension inside her was constant, a low hum of anticipation and anxiety. Every conversation, every email, every observation kept her mind sharp, focused, and alert. Her desire for revenge was no longer a raw, unbridled force. It had become a disciplined, deliberate energy driving her actions. And yet, the moral struggle persisted. She had to remind herself constantly that the goal was justice and balance, not cruelty or destruction. As the weeks passed, Elena felt the weight of her plan pressing on her, the psychological intensity building to a near constant awareness. She knew the final act was approaching, the moment when decisions would matter. More than planning, when execution would determine whether months of preparation would succeed or fail. In the meantime, she kept her composure, maintaining the appearance of normalcy, all the while sharpening her understanding of Marcus, the environment, and her own inner motivations. The conflict was as much internal as external. She had been betrayed, but she refused to be consumed entirely by anger. She balanced observation with reflection, patience with urgency, and strategy with conscience. The path ahead was tense and uncertain, but Elena knew that the choices she made now would shape not only the outcome of her revenge, but also the kind of person she would become. Every decision, every mental rehearsal, every interaction was a step toward a climactic moment, a test of skill, restraint, and moral clarity. And through it all, the fire of betrayal remained, tempered now with focus, patience, and an unyielding desire to reclaim what had been lost, not through impulsive action, but through intelligence, discipline, and moral resolve.